Alright, what is good, ladies and gentlemen, is the Mass Compare back again with another comparison, and today we are doing a comparison for the Angry Birds movie and Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. This is a recommendation from Ethan King 7159, so it's been a while since we've done a recommendation, so big shout out to Ethan King 7159 for the recommendation. And yeah, as usual, if you have any recommendations, leave it in the comments and I will check it out. And yeah, let us just begin, starting off with the protagonist. So this is just going to be the first Angry Birds movie, because that is in the comment you should have seen by now. That is what was listed. It wasn't both, it was just the first. So yeah, anyway, so the protagonist in the Angry Birds movie is Red, and in the Captain Underpants movie it is George and Harold. And I would say that I enjoyed Red as a protagonist more so. I just like the challenge that, like, the struggle that he faces, like, no one likes him, and he's like angry at society more so than George and Harold, where their whole issue was just that, oh, they were going to be separating classes. So I think that Red's struggle is better, so I'm going to give it to the Angry Birds movie. In terms of the deuteragonist, I think that, well, in Captain Underpants, the deuteragonist would be probably Captain Underpants himself, because I do kind of consider, like, technically I try to usually pick one protagonist, but in the case of, like, I don't know, like, there are films where a lot of the times there are just two protagonists, like George and Harold, so I do kind of consider both of them to just share the role of the protagonist, and I would say that the deuteragonist is probably Captain Underpants. So, and in the Angry Birds movie, the deuteragonist is, yeah, this is another case where it's like, I guess both Bomb and Chuck kind of share the role of being the deuteragonists, so I guess I'll just, yeah, I think in general I might just start grouping in, like, if there is more than one protagonist, or if there is more than one, like, if there's not a clear protagonist or if there's not a clear deuteragonist, I might just group in the closest things to it, so just for the sake of convenience. So who do I like better, Chuck and Bomb or Captain Underpants? I think I kind of like Chuck and Bomb better. I think they just had better chemistry with Red, honestly, than George and Harold did with Captain Underpants. Like, it very much felt like Captain Underpants was, like, I don't know, doing his own thing, and he would just, like, kind of loosely interact with George and Harold. But yeah, I would say that I liked the Angry Birds movie, the deuteragonist there of Chuck and Bomb, better than, like, I think, I don't know. Actually, no, but this is supposed to be the characters themselves, not the roles of them as the deuteragonists. Like, the character, who do I like better, Chuck and Bomb? Or even so, I think that Chuck and Bomb were honestly funnier. I did think that Captain Underpants was probably the funniest character in the movie, but I do think that Chuck and Bomb, they were just more entertaining, and, like, their abilities of, like, Chuck being fast, Bomb being able to explode, it was more interesting than Captain Underpants. Just as by the end of the film he does get, like, strength and flight and stuff. So unlimited underwear, that's another one. But yeah, I'm gonna give it to the Angry Birds movie. In terms of antagonist, so it's Leonard from the Angry Birds movie versus Professor Poopy Pants from Captain Underpants, and I'm going to give it to Leonard. I think he is just more entertaining of an antagonist, whereas Poopy Pants, his whole motive is just that he wants to eliminate all laughter. It just feels like a very, I don't know, just not that interesting of a motivation, very, very goofy. Whereas Leonard, it's like he actually is trying to, if he feels more evil, where he is going after, like, the eggs of the birds and stuff, like basically stealing all their children and stuff. So I think that is a better antagonist, I would say. So, and it was just more entertaining, I thought. So in terms of the side cast, you have, in Captain Underpants, you don't really have too much of a side cast. It's just basically like Melvin and Edith, honestly, and, like, maybe, I guess you could also consider, like, Principal Krupp to be the deuteragonist, I guess, or you could consider being part of the side cast. So, and in the Angry Birds movie, you have, like, Matilda, let's see here, you have Terrence, I guess, and so honestly, neither film really has a great side cast, but I think that probably I'll give it to the Angry Birds movie once again, just because I think that kind of just, I don't know, like, I think Matilda was a good character as well, like Terrence and stuff, and Melvin I didn't really care for. Edith, she was fine, but just more so because, like, it was nice to have, like, someone that kept it was like good growth, I guess, for Krupp's character by the end of the film, where it's like he does get happier once he has, like, someone in his life. So I thought that was alright, but even so, yeah, just like the bird society that, like, Red lives in, I guess they would be considered kind of like the side cast of the film. Maybe some of the other pigs that, like, I don't know, besides Leonard, like, every other pig in that film, specifically in the first Angry Birds film, none of them are really very prominent. So, but even so, they had, like, good scenes, like, even if it was just, like, pigs that aren't actually characters, I would say. So I'm going to give it to the Angry Birds movie. In terms of the settings, I'm going to give it to the Angry Birds movie once again, because the settings of Bird Island and Pig Island are a lot more unique and interesting compared to just the school, the Captain Underpants movie, and like their George and Harold's Treehouse and stuff. So I'm going to give it to the Angry Birds film. In terms of which one had the better plot, the Angry Birds movie definitely. I think the worst thing that I said about the Captain Underpants film in my review was the plot itself. The plot itself just was not the most interesting in my opinion, whereas the plot of the Angry Birds film I did like better, of like Red being suspicious of these pigs that just show up to their island, but all the birds are very trusting of the pigs, and then eventually the pigs do end up betraying the birds, and it leads to like the final confrontation which is like the one-to-one parallel of the not a one-to-one parallel, but it's the birds shooting themselves on a slingshot to destroy like the pig's home. So I thought that was great. Whereas the Captain Underpants movie is just basically hijinks with Captain Underpants in like the first half, and in the second half, like the whole thing with Professor P and him wanting to like destroy all of laughter, which I just didn't really think it was the most interesting plot, I would say. So yeah, I'm going to point to the Angry Birds movie. In terms of which one had the better comedy, I think that, yeah, probably the Angry Birds movie. It's just, again, I think Chuck and Bomb, just the moments that they have. Mighty Eagle as well, he's another character that I forgot to mention up until this point, but he is also very funny. A lot of good moments, whether it's with Red, whether it's with, the pigs, have a lot of good moments as well. The Captain Underpants movie, I think most of the comedy just comes from Captain Underpants, who does have a lot of good moments, I will say that, but even so, I think that Angry Birds movie is just the comedy I just enjoy more so. So, in terms of the action, we're going to give this one once again to the Angry Birds movie, because it was just the action of that film was a lot more entertaining, of like the birds shooting themselves to destroy the structures of the pigs, whereas in the Captain Underpants movie, the action basically is just shrink ray shenanigans in like the final confrontation against Professor P versus like George and Harold and stuff. And besides that, yeah, it was fine, but I just enjoyed the destruction of the Angry Birds movie more so. So yeah, I'm gonna give it once again to the Angry Birds movie. In terms of which one had the bigger cultural impact, that's a good one. I'm not really sure. I think probably the Angry Birds movie, just because of the fact that I have to start like taking meme culture into consideration, because I think that meme culture is like a pretty good indicator of like how culturally impactful a film is. And I have seen more Angry Birds memes on the internet compared to Captain Underpants memes, which I don't really. No, I have actually seen a good amount of Captain Underpants memes as well. So I'll give a point to both, just because of the fact that Captain Underpants has not gotten a point yet. So we have a point to both, I guess. In terms of which one has the better clothing, I would say that. So the Angry Birds, there's no real clothing in that film, and in Captain Underpants, like Captain Underpants himself just wears underpants, I guess. However, I did like Professor P's outfit in like the final confrontation. He had like a nice purple suit, so I will give the point to Captain Underpants for that. In terms of which one had the better equipment, the Angry Birds movie did have the slingshot, which was cool, but the Captain Underpants movie had the shrink ray, which I guess was also pretty good, the shrinking and enlarging ray, as well as I guess the toilets that Melvin made that is like turned into the giant robot at the end of the fight. So which was better, the slingshot? I did like the slingshot though. The slingshot did lead to like the whole final like battle between the birds and the pigs, which was really good. So I'll give a point to both once again. I'll be generous in this case. In terms of which one had the better actors / voice actors, I'm going to give it to the Angry Birds film. I just like the voice acting in that film better. I like the performances a bit more than the Captain Underpants movie, which it felt a bit more less high stakes, or just it felt a lot more dramatic in the Angry Birds movie compared to the Captain Underpants movie. So I'm going to give it to the Angry Birds film. In terms of which one had the better soundtrack, the Captain Underpants movie did have a pretty good outro, like the final theme of like the Captain Underpants song I did actually like. However, the Angry Birds movie did have that whole the pig performance. With I think the best song in that film was like when the pigs are doing their performance, the country performance. I thought that was a pretty good song as well. So I'll give a point to both. I think that both films had like one specific song which I thought was pretty good. So in terms of which one had the better visuals, I think that probably the Angry Birds film, I like the visuals a bit more, because once again there's just a bit more of a unique setting, a bit more destruction in like the final act and stuff. And in terms of which, I think probably art style wise, I might actually like the Captain Underpants movie a bit better. But I do still think that ultimately the visuals of the Angry Birds film I did enjoy more. So yeah, in terms of which one had the better title, you have the Angry Birds movie versus Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. I'm gonna give it to the Angry Birds movie. It just sounds much simpler and nicer, I would say. if you called it the Captain Underpants movie, it might have been a bit better, but Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, like it might even just be, I don't know, it's either the fact that they had epic in there, like if they had called it the first movie, or if they maybe removed the first from it and called it the epic movie or something like that. I don't know, just it feels a bit too much like they're doing with the title of the Captain Underpants film compared to the Angry Birds movie, which just sounds a lot more like clean, I would say. And finally, which one do I personally like better? Yeah, I like the Angry Birds movie personally more, so I enjoyed more. I think I give the Angry Birds movie a 7 out of 10, I'm pretty sure, or actually no, if it was the first one, I would have given it like a 7.5, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I gave the first film a 7.5, I thought it was very good. And the Captain Underpants movie I just reviewed, I gave it a 6 out of 10, I thought it was above average, but yeah, I definitely think that the Angry Bird movie is a decent amount ahead in terms of, yeah, quality, I guess, compared to the Captain, well, not necessarily quality, but yeah, I think that the Angry Birds movie was better than the Captain Underpants movie, so personally, I liked the Angry Birds movie better, so yeah. And so let's see here, the final score. We have Angry Birds with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 points, and we have the Captain Underpants movie at 1, 2, 3, 4. So it is 4 to 15 in favor of the Angry Birds movie. So the Angry Birds movie is the winner. And so yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. So once again, big shout out to Ethan King 7159. Really do appreciate the recommendation. Anyone that has any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review or rank or compare, rankings, it does not have to be media related, it could be anything. Leave it in the comments and I will maybe possibly check it out. With that said, that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's leave it at that.